Hello and welcome back here to the last live session before the karaoke at the winter conference. I'm really delighted to introduce this session, and in a moment I'm going to ask you all to hopefully put your virtual hands together to welcome our two presenters, Therese and Teresa. Hello you two, fantastic to have you with us. I have to say, I'm so excited about the session because we have a very long tradition of having open education special interest group sessions as one of the highlights of our winter conference. And I was saying this morning in the welcome that we've toasted marshmallows over campfires, and we're looking forward to having everybody join us for this last session today. I know that you're all ready and raring to go, so without further ado, I'm going to hand over to you.
Thanks very much, Maren, and I'm delighted to be here this afternoon with my colleague Teresa, who's also an Open Ed SIG committee member. And what we're going to do today is really just run through a very different event that we decided to try out recently and talk a little bit about why we did it and how we did it. And Teresa and I, between us, will have a conversation around that experience and share some of the resources with you. And we'd really welcome your feedback on this approach. The Open Ed SIG traditionally has always hosted expert webinars, if you like, on a particular open education topic, whether it's open source or values of open education. We have recorded those webinars and then made them available through our website. Maren will be able to share our website link with you in the chat there, so you can visit it if you've never visited us before. We decided to do something a little bit different. So here we're just a quick reminder that those of you who are with us, please do introduce yourselves in the chat, and if you have any questions you can pop them in the chat and we'll have a few moments at the end of the session to address those. And again, this session will be recorded as usual. So why did we decide to make a change to our usual way of working, if you like, within the special interest group on open education? Well, we had a conversation amongst the committee. We're a small committee, but a very active and committed committee. And as a result of getting together and as a result of some suggestions from other members of the committee, we thought about changing things a little bit. So I think I just summarized, and Teresa, feel free to add anything else that I've forgotten here, some of the rationale for trying a different space and a different approach for the coming year in Open Ed SIG. So we decided that the pivot online, particularly over the last year or so, and the conditions that we've been living through due to the pandemic, really led to us rethinking bringing people into webinars. We kind of were all feeling a bit webinared out.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's a sentiment that I think we identified with. We're also aware that the demands of the pivot were actually a little bit of an opportunity for open education, an opportunity to reach out to people who perhaps hadn't thought along the lines of using OER or producing and sharing their own material openly. And that required connecting to newbies, connecting to people who may be interested and want to know more about open practice. And open practice had been a focus for the SIG for a little while. And thirdly, we really felt that it was important that people felt safe in that sort of environment where perhaps they're talking about open practice, and that in itself can be quite controversial within institutions. And I know Teresa has some great examples of this, where it can be ethically very difficult to navigate open practice. So we thought maybe it would be nice to have a safe space where people could join anonymously and just ask questions and reach out and find connections. So Teresa, is there anything else I've missed, or anything you can
Yeah,
Tell
no,
us.
I agree, and I would just like to sort of highlight the this need for a safe space. It's kind of funny because you wouldn't think, but I guess open education it's a little political and maybe a lot political, and kind of struggles that we've been going through in higher education with the pivot online, well, other kinds of education as well. Um, it's you can't necessarily talk about it with everybody. So, and if you need
Yeah.
some help and you just need to try something, if you'd like to try something else, it's good to be able to find someone who kind of knows what the issues could be, or could at least understand the reticence you might have about speaking openly about some of these things. So yeah, I mean, a couple of folks that we met that day are on Twitter, but privately. So so the tweets aren't even open. So things like that, I realize that it's really good to be sensitive to that, and make a space for that.
Yeah, absolutely, and it is so important when people feel vulnerable to provide spaces to support them. I think that was very much part of the thinking. So from there, we went through a sort of process that involved Therese and I and Deb Bath and others on the committee getting together as and when we could, to have a chat about what sort of spaces could we look at,
Hmm.
and how could we facilitate this, and how could it go forward. And Deb was very quick to put forward a couple of suggestions of spaces. So we then did some testing, and we planned an event which we published on our website and pushed out through the JISC mail to see if people were interested. We did some sharing and some follow-up for queries, and we shared a Google Doc for the event. And again, Maren will be able to pop that link in the chat for you to see. It was at the time an open editable Google Doc, and it sort of traces the beginnings of the process, the topics that we chose for this open house event, which was a very different event, as I mentioned, from our earlier event. And the idea here was that we would have a record of the nature of the queries and questions that were posed, and also the resources that were shared during the get together. I think it's fair to say, Therese, that we had no idea what sort of take up we would have
Exactly.
at the time. We had no
Exactly.
idea whether this would be a large event or not. We really, even in the sort of testing context, we didn't really know whether the site that we were using would contribute and help us achieve our aims. It was, we felt it might, but we didn't really know very clearly whether it would or not. So it was very much experimental.
Exactly. I've just popped the Google Doc into the chat as
Oh,
well.
lovely.
So
Thank you.
so
That's
yeah, so
great.
that'll share.
Thanks for that. 4 hands are infinitely better than 2.
Great, and we've got Deb with us now as well.
Yay!
Wonderful.
Oh,
Excellent. Hi, Deb.
You
Bang
look
on
festive.
cue. Bang on cue, because Deb was responsible for bringing a couple of these different environments to our notice and suggesting that we try these out. And one of those was an interface called Wanda. And that was the one that we decided to proceed with. There was GatherTown was mentioned, and
That's true.
others were mentioned as well. I think Deb's got a wide knowledge of different platforms. So Debs, tell us a little bit about, why you thought that that might be a sort of suitable place, a starting point, if you like, a suitable platform for this different type of open ed SIG.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I think really the idea behind it was to give people somewhere different, really, to come and kind of inhabit it. And this has been a bit of a theme for me this week, because we had the SOCMed HE conference yesterday, which was actually in Gathertown. And I've got to say, having experienced that, I found that really, really great. And I think Wonder has the same kind of approach to it. I think perhaps I just didn't maybe use it properly. But, having said that, I think the fact that it's kind of almost merges the different tools that people are used to using these days. And there's lots of these different platforms around, but the fact that you can kind of bumble along with your avatar all over the screen and then accidentally stand on someone's head, as I seem to be doing quite a lot, which I didn't mean to, but it kind of brings back that serendipitous water cooler type moment that you would get in normal sort of face-to-face conferences. Really, I suppose that's what we were kind of aiming for.
Absolutely.
It would be really great, really, and obviously it's not recorded. We didn't record it or anything like that. It was just to give people that safe space, and the idea being that you could have lots of different rooms or tables or that kind of thing for that kind of conversation. So if you're interested as well, I was going to say check out the SOCMed one, because that I think they've put some resources out on that as well. So
the thing I liked. Sorry. I was just going to say the thing I liked about it was, it was a bit silly. Because you had to kind of move your avatar over to other people because you couldn't hear the conversation unless you were closer, just like in a real face-to-face gathering. And I was like, yay, it felt kind of like back to face. But then I was like having trouble with my mouse, and I was like, no, wait a minute, I can't get over there. But it didn't matter because everybody was like that, and you got there in the end. And then I love the fact that you could do a tannoy announcement.
Yes.
That was cool. I mean, that also gave us a feeling of like presence together, and
and I think the kind of having that those kind of issues is the wrong word, but having to work through those things kind of gave you a catalyst really for talking and making it, we're all kind of in this together and all that kind of thing. So in terms of social presence and all that kind of stuff, I thought it really had legs, I think completely agree with you, and mouse in the wrong place and all sorts of things. So it was great fun.
Issues with the screen size and things as well. I couldn't read people's names, so I was having to remember who was who. But it was lovely to be able to sort of bubble around that space and go and meet other people. And but with my sort of chair hat on, I was concerned before we started that there may be complaints or sorry, cat had to come in through window. Life goes on.
Love it.
Concerns about sort of accessibility and concerns about people feeling this is an unusual space, I don't know what to do here, feeling a little bit and so it really, as we did the testing and as we talked about it, we talked about, okay, well, how can we address some of these things? And what I was so proud of, and I haven't even had the chance to feed back to the rest of the team on this, but what I was so proud of was that everybody within the committee and also the people that came were very supportive of each other. And if you saw somebody come in and you saw that bubble floating down, they would go and sort of round that person up. They'd go and get close to that person so they could hear them and say, follow me, or bring them to the conversation. And I think that welcome, and I know that hospitality aspect of open practice, which is something that Mahabali has talked about in the past, was put in action in a very real way.
And care, isn't it? That whole
it is.
Yeah.
I
mean, I have nicely with your PhD, actually.
Well, funny you should say that.
Just noticed that.
Nice segue in there.
No, I was just going to comment that back in the day when I used to go into Second Life, I went in there about a year ago, and that one was like kind of full on. You were someone different. Everyone else looked different. And that one was definitely like scarier. I mean, I personally didn't really find it that scary, but sometimes people did, because there was a lot that you had to do. And like, you could, like, I don't know, like, lose your shoes or other parts of your clothing without knowing that you clicked that. So nothing like that in Wonder Me or I guess in
No,
Gather
that's
Town,
right. Yeah.
So it was personal, personal and personable, but not like to any sort of scary extent in
No,
any way.
that's right. And you've reminded me actually of something that occurred to me when Deb was talking earlier about um, the serendipity of these different situations. I was a Second Life, and still now and again I'm a Second Life user.
Yeah.
And whenever I teleported, my hair would fly off. And I'd turn up in places bald and have to wait for my hair to arrive. And it's kind of, there was just something about that just made me laugh, and made, it broke the sort of panic and anxiety of an environment that's actually very media rich and quite challenging, as you say. A lot of menus to check and a lot of things to take on board. Yeah, so having fun playing. So Deb very kindly provided us with a few images here after sort of checking with people that they were okay in sharing this. It's interesting that we said to people, you're anonymous in this space, but they still chose to put their names in as they came in. Fine. But perhaps, as you can see there, the background there I went with was a sort of troubled ocean, because it kind of felt that that's where we'd been over the last year or so, sort of thrown in at the deep end and looking to others for help and trying to establish a way forward. And literally, as you drag yourself into these bubbles, we had little areas within that image that were themed around meeting, around the ebooks SOS discussion, a general chat, talking about links and link rot, and talking about copyright and IP. So we had these spaces, and only when you are in one of those spaces near to the people having a conversation does your video feed show up, and then you can see the real faces of the real people rather than the bubbles floating around. We also had obviously one big shared space that we could come into, and we came into at the end. It was really good to see people, though I know Myron will recognize many of the people here, but really good to see people who don't usually engage with the Open Ed SIG coming. And we had some really fruitful discussions, I think, with the eBooks SOS people as well. And then the second image on that slide is an illustration of the sort of broadcast. So at the top, the top right-hand side of the higher image, the fourth icon down, you can see a sort of lectern. And if you use that lectern, it sends a message to everyone in the environment that a broadcast is going to start. It's only a very short one, but it brings everybody together and everybody can hear that. So that's really useful for sort of announcements and drawing everything together. So if you're not familiar with wonder.me or WonderMe, that's what it looked like. A lot of happy faces, which is good. And in that document, if you've seen it, you may have seen it already. We also collected some feedback from participants. So I just included those in this slide. Guys, if you've got anything you want to comment on there, I think we've sort of alluded to most of these, but please do. Or, I think the last one is yours, Debbie.
I think that my kind of take home from it is that you really need something really low stakes to kind of start off with, with these things, so that people gain that bit of confidence that, they can just wander around and press buttons and, all of that kind of stuff. And, I think, and I know, as I said, I mentioned the SOPMed conference because they'd obviously spent a lot of time to actually set up the environment, and I think that was really, really great, the way that was done. And I think if, reflecting on how we did our particular one, I think if we'd had more time to set it up, we could have gone down that particular route, and maybe done a little video or something for people to show them what it was like before we started. But having said that, I think just having that capability where people could kind of drop in, you know, and maybe even use it for office hours or that kind of thing could be something to think about going forward. So I'm glad that people played with us around.
Absolutely.
And followed us around. It was great fun chasing people around the screen.
It really was, and it was great to see people taking that active role to make people feel at home, so they didn't just come in and then disappear again. Many people who joined us couldn't stay for very long. The session itself was probably about 45 minutes, but that's fine. You know, nobody really wants to spend hours and hours online on top of what they're doing in their day job. So
we did say, didn't we, as well, that we were thinking that we could try lots of these different spaces out, you know, just to kind of have a safe place for people to come. That's hard to say, safe space.
This time of day. Wait until 8:30.
Yeah. So it would be good to maybe ask people who were kind of taking part today, just, you know, if they're interested in coming along. You know, we're open to all different ideas, aren't we, about how we can
Absolutely.
kind of use.
I think another thing that was really helpful was to have the Google Doc that, you know, anybody who came in could contribute to it, like simultaneously, as you know, it could be at the same time as while you're talking to people. You could be just copying in a URL or something that had been mentioned, so that it was like a joint document was produced just by lots of, you know, people from the community, and I thought that was really exciting.
Yeah, definitely.
I totally agree, and I was surprised that the Google Doc continued to be added to beyond the event. So you know, I know you followed up with Dan, and I also followed up with Dan to reach out, because he hadn't been able to stay with us. So we'd been, one of the people who participated is from UNESCO, and was particularly interested in making contacts around open. And so, you know, for us that was a really great opportunity to meet that person and to make that connection. And that'll be followed up, obviously. So I think the resounding feeling that I had at the end of the session was just one of joy. You know, that this was a joyful moment. This was a kind of this was something different, and connections were made that we hadn't made through you know, sort of webinars. It was interesting as well that we had, because we'd posted the invitation on the community space, we had a couple of queries there about, you know, how do I register? And because I'd been concerned about, you know, just putting the URL out there, the link for the event just out there, I was then able to email those people, and somehow that sort of creates a closer connection. And I just hope that sort of builds into other aspects of our work in open education going forward. So I want to share one little video that I made. I'll pop this into the chat as well, but I'll leave it. There we go, on my screen. And this really was. Let's just full screen this rather than sending it to my telly, which isn't going to help much.
I could try.
I could show it, but my telly's the other end of the room, so you're not going to see very much there. It was something that actually had occurred to me when in an LTHE chat a little while ago, when we talked about bubbles, or bubbles had been mentioned. And we often talk, I think, when we talk about using technology, about bubbles being a negative thing. You know, that people pull together in a bubble and they stay in that little bubble and they don't go outside it. And so I wanted to do a very childish little experiment, and you'll see it here. And hopefully my screen is my video is about to play back. Taking a little while. If it takes this long, I'll put the link in the chat. You can play it on your own machines. My machine is
earlier.
Yeah, exactly. My machine is going very, very slowly. Okay, let's stop my sharing, and I'll put this into the chat instead, because my screen is ridiculously slow. And right, let's put this into the chat. So it literally is 10 seconds.
Cool.
Have a look and see what if you think you know what I'm getting at.
Cool. Doing it now.
I spent ages doing this for 10 seconds of video.
I just wish I got to play with the bubbles as well.
I'm sending you bubbles.
But you got it to stick. You caught it.
Yes,
Yes.
yes.
Yeah.
The power
Yeah.
of video.
So
it
was
all
that
about-
a normal bubble? Because you can get those bubbles with glue in it as well. Can't
Oh
you?
no, this was just
Ooh.
ordinary bubbles. Ordinary
Ordinary
bubbles from
bubbles.
Tiger, I think. And I still get them out now and again because they're fun to play with. But there was a distant childhood memory that actually when you blow bubbles, you can catch them and then link them up to other bubbles.
Ah.
And
So
they
cool.
sort of fuse.
I think
That
yeah,
makes sense.
people were just saying that they couldn't see the link in the chat. So it was a video of Teresa
private.
basically blowing bubbles, with a bubble, kids bubble kind of thing, and she managed to catch a bubble.
So when I put a link in the chat, is that not visible to people who are joining us in the
No,
room?
I think
Oh,
only
right.
if it's done in the background. So
Sorry, Teresa. I had a
Sorry,
bit of a
Maren, can you
technical
do that?
glitch. I'll do that now.
Oh,
Absolutely.
thank you.
Thank you.
It's 10 seconds of bubble
bubble
nonsense.
joy. Yeah.
Bubble joy. Yeah, let's
Yeah,
go with
bubble
bubble joy.
I'm very disappointed I was the only one with festive headgear. I've
You know
obviously got
what?
the wrong one now. Oh, there you go.
I had mine ready. Here's one I prepared earlier.
Oh,
Yes.
there you go.
And Yorick has come as well.
Excellent.
So
Well, I did
I'm-
have my festive jumper on as well. So
Oh, very nice. Very nice.
There we go.
Jingle those bells. So really, I think what we discovered together was that actually we could take a leap of faith. Wouldn't it be wonderful if every platform out there was automatically accessible and easy to use for people using screen readers and everything else? I couldn't
Exactly.
find anything out, unfortunately, about WonderMe in that respect. But if anybody uses it, please let us know, because that's the sort of thing that OpenEdSig likes to push for, that people put accessibility first. And the importance really of somehow, I suppose part of the pivot was that we suddenly, something that we all enjoyed doing, using learning technology, had become a treadmill. It had become a place where, first thing in the morning, you knew you've got to log on, you've got to catch up on emails, you've got to contact all the people who are struggling to use X. And I know Teresa and Debs have both very much been, at the chalk face of this, and at that sort of very demanding interface where you feel pulled in so many directions. And it was just nice to rediscover that learning technology can be fun again, and that you can do silly stuff, and not dismiss it just as play being something superficial, but as something that connects us at a much deeper level, and enables us to learn from each other and make new connections, make new bubbles, and make bigger bubbles.
New bubbles
Yeah.
of joy.
I'm just looking at some of these comments, and I like this was minutes ago. Devin had said it's a delicate process building trust with the generation that invented the Finsta, for sure. So the fake Insta.
I'm glad you explained that to me.
Yeah. So using social media to sort of, I don't know, I wouldn't use the word stalk, but it can be used to stalk, and you could say that that's what the fake Insta is. And so that's just another illustration of why it's good to have a safe space where we can say what's going on, ask if anybody has had an experience like that. Can you suggest something? Can we do something new? Can we work together?
And it is important to try these things, and and to see, maybe it's by experience, isn't it, that you learn what maybe doesn't quite work well, and that what you might want to do better and things like that. So
I think it's yet another wonderful experience with my Open Ed Sig friends, and I'm so privileged to be part of the group. And don't forget, it is an open group, so you're all invited.
Yes, please
Yeah.
come
Please join us. Join us through the JISC mail list, Open Ed Sig. You'll find us on the JISC mail, and just connect with us. We have an Open Ed Twitter as well, Open Ed Sig Twitter account. And there we go. There's the link. Brilliant. So thank you all so much, and thank you, Therese and Debs, for joining me. And suddenly StreamYard is slightly less anxiety producing for me. I've never used it before.
Well, a big thank you to all three of you. It's been a really eye-opening and inspiring session. I really enjoyed the bubble moment, and I think it's wonderful that we've had our customary openness and warmth here for the winter conference. So I know that everybody in the room appreciated it just as much as I did and put their hands together to say a big thank you. For now, I think we'll say goodbye, and as the first day of our winter conference draws to a close, I know that in just over an hour they'll be singing live on the internet. So if you're up for a little bit of fun with Jim Groom and Jahira and Emma Jane, then do join the karaoke. There's options to watch and there's options to join in. So
Cool.
I think two of you, or all three of you, actually already have the right outfits on. So I'm looking forward to seeing you there all later. I think there's one final question from Devon that we could pick up, which is, how did you find the admin side creating spaces for people to float into, especially in comparison to creating breakout rooms? So why don't we pick up that question before we finish up?
Yeah, sure. It was a little bit more limited in terms of the space you have. You can set up rooms, but actually when you, sort of spaces, squares within your background visual. And to be fair, I'm no expert. I've very much just gone in and sort of did what I needed to do, sort of thing. But yeah, it's kind of, for me, it's not the all singing, all dancing, Collaborate Ultra or Zoom or whatever, but it does do some really useful things, and just like within an institution, we've got rooms for different purposes. It provided a space that was perhaps different for people, interesting for people, maybe broke down some of the normal barriers, and it's worth experimenting with. I'm sure you can do more complex things. We used a free version. We just went with basics.
Well, Vicky commented in the comments that it sounded like a really safe and playful space. And I think Kathy said, sounds like a lovely group. Lauren said, thanks, folks. Just been reading info on the outside. Interesting, investigating further. So sounds like there's some more people coming. So from all of us here at the open house session, thank you again for joining us. We hope you enjoyed day 2 of the conference, and I just want to say a really big thank you to our 3 wonderful presenters. Love to you all, and see you all tomorrow. Thanks very much.
Thank you.